Okay. All right, we are back on the record, so to speak. Welcome to the committee room. We are resuming the meeting to begin, as discussed, our conversation about our strategic, long-range, high-priority action items for the basically the balance of this council, right?
That's correct, for the next 20 months or so.
Next 20 months. For those of you playing at home, or am I going to take all your thunder here by telling you how the process works?
No, it's all good.
The way this works is staff diligently reaches out to each of the council members separately in advance to get an idea of what we might have in mind in terms of long-range, high-priority action items. Now, one thing I'll mention is that we don't have high, medium, and low-priority action items because we've decided it's not PC to have any low-priority actions. So we only have high and really high. It's kind of a joke, but what the idea here is that we're going to try to come up with items that we can all agree that the staff and the village resources should be devoted towards accomplishing, in addition to the day-to-day things that they do anyway, such as plowing snow and answering 911 calls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But these are projects and kind of a to-do list that we would like to get done over the designated period of time within the resources that we have available. And obviously, there's always, given 7 people, more ideas, and having lots of ideas means you're guaranteed to have good ideas. So what staff has done is they've captured, as best they can, a number of different ideas, understanding we can't do all of these and that we may not all agree on everything, but we will certainly come out of today, or if not today, shortly, with a handful of items that we can all agree should be things that staff should give high priority attention to accomplishing over the next 20 months. Did I summarize that more or less accurately?
Very well done, Mayor. Thank you. I would just add to that traditionally we've limited the list to 12, and that's because in the 10 years we've been doing it like this, we've never done more than 12 in any given time frame. The comment building on that is we're not obligated to 12, so if we get to the point where we have concurrence and council direction on fewer than 12, that's fine too. What we'll do if that happens is we'll just report out more often. If we happen to blow through a list that's shorter than 12 and we get done in 10 or 12 months, then we can just continue the discussion at that point. So no more than 12, but it's not an obligation to get to 12. I think it's more important to come up with a list of actions that are supported by the council. We will continue to provide you regular updates. We do have hard copies of the report that supports this, so you can take notes on it. It includes the ideas that were generated by council members through formal and informal conversations. We're also not limited to anything on here. It's an open forum. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Thank you. And one other thing to add is one of the reasons why we try to keep this somewhat flexible is we cannot predict what's going to happen over the next 20 months. While we come up with a list of high-priority action items, and I agree we should focus on ones we can all agree to, and let's get going on those and not worry about trying to fill a sort of an arbitrary egg container with 12 projects. But things will happen over the course of time. Something will come up, it always does, over the course of the next 6, 8, 12, 9 months. And we'll have to probably adjust because of that currently unforeseen item occurring. That pretty much is guaranteed to happen. There's always something that comes up. So the other reason not to get overwhelmed is it keeps us with the opportunity of addressing, thank you, addressing those things that might come up that are unforeseen.
There are 5 items already underway and identified by the council.
Quick comment as we talk about the number of items. I agree that we should go through a process. Good managers go over these things with their direct reports. Setting objectives, goals, priorities, that's good management. But I think there's been a tendency when a new item comes up that, we already have 11, we already have 12, not sure we can do this. And that's the knee-jerk reaction. And I'll give a case in point. The ethics ordinance, when it was first brought up, the first knee-jerk reaction is, we got 10, we got 11. And council is, so some of the council members go, they got 10 or 11, they're at capacity and can't do that. Well, as a result of asking for it, right after that meeting, Commissioner Olson and myself were invited to the village attorney's office, and we knocked it out in 20 minutes. So I'm warning that I don't like being limited to 10 or 11, or you only get 7, or the knee-jerk reaction when something new comes up that, oh my God, we got X number. That doesn't happen in corporate America. When a boss goes to an employee and says, I want this, I need this, and the response is, I got 10 or 11, maybe you could find some, I can't do it. Which one do you want to shuffle? And in corporate America, the answer is, okay, I'll get somebody who can do it. Goodbye. So I just offer that caution, that warning that, setting the number and the response, oh, we're at capacity. A good manager will know it when there's capacity, but we shouldn't have that knee-jerk reaction.
Just picking up on that, I think that's another reason why, rather than we've got an egg carton and we need to fill it with 12 eggs, let's just talk about what are the things we all agree to go forward on. Once we go forward on, that will A, keep capacity, but also B, if we get through it, we can always meet again and go on to the next project. I think that's actually probably better than a static, fixed list. So my suggestion is, I think what the manager mentioned is, let's talk about what these things are. Whatever the number is that we all think are great, 5, 6, 7, it doesn't really matter.
Whatever it is.
Just go to the races on those.
So let me just add that our list changes during the 20-month process because we do regular updates. And I think all of this council was a part of major amendments where things that were on the list got taken off the list and got replaced by other things. We've also had a strong history of performance of being able to work in things in addition to the list throughout the years that come up on new business. Mr. Waldeck just gave a great example of one. So this is not an end-all and be-all list. This is a living list. It changes. All it really does is help point the staff in a direction consistent with council priorities. That's it. So that's the spirit in which the staff is looking, help us to go the way you want us. We're a resource to you. Where would you like us to put some time?
Okay, go ahead, please.
Hopefully very brief, I guess on the internet you'd call it a meta comment. Looking at these, deciding how big each one is seems especially challenging this year. So when we create an arbitrary number, 6, 8, 10, 12, well, we don't know how big each one is, so it's pretty hard to say when you got to 10 or 12 or 14 or whatever, because the size of these, and there's a great deal of overlap as well. So I think in some ways we may need to be just a little less rigid in our thinking about this.
Agreed.
Because this may be challenging this year because we have multiple items that link together. And some of these things we may take a long time, we may knock out in 2 meetings and they're done. We thought we'd need 6 months or a year and we're done. So let's just see what we want to do.
And go from there.
Yep.
Sounds like a plan.
Yep.
All right, so let's get to the list, and this is at least what has been gathered as potential items for consensus.
In addition to the 5 that we already got consensus on over the last couple of months, which are also on the board on the left-hand side.
To the left are things that we already have consensus on. Do we just want to do a check, make sure does anybody change their mind on the ones on the left that we all agree are things worth pursuing?
The ones on the left have synergy with ones on the right. So I believe they all should stay there, yet they kind of blend in. So maybe I'm not totally comfortable the way they're written, because I think they should be combined in a few ways with some others. But yes, all those 5 are things we have to do.
I agree. All right. Look at that. Okay, let's go over to the right. And I know these came from different people, and so folks should feel free to elaborate if they think they need to explain. Or if anyone has, let me start with this. If anyone has questions about what any of these things mean,
I was just about to say to do that.
let's ask and then try to get some better definitions of what they are. Because that's, I think, also scope is important. And if they do overlap, that'll become more apparent if we understand it.
It would be helpful for a very quick rundown. I think it would
be immensely helpful for a very quick rundown.
All right, the first 2 have to do with amending stormwater regulations and stormwater utility credits and incentives. This has been brought to the council twice in the last 8 months, so it's the same scope that you've seen before. We haven't taken any action on it yet, but it is ready to go. It's already been vetted by the Stormwater Floodplain Oversight Committee. This is the idea of changing regulations to mitigate flooding and drainage issues from development.
By making our current stormwater regulations more restrictive than they currently are.
Correct. This also includes a recent discussion of LPDA regulation modifications, more stringent or more aligned or what have you, any change to LPDA.
And for the non-government types, an LPDA is what?
It's a big puddle that forms in heavy rains, localized poor drainage area. This one, enhance engagement of our board and commission members. This is an expansion of the idea of a board and commission member retreat where we work to better align our board and commission members with the goals, objectives of the council and how the staff operates on a day-to-day basis. Developed an approach to economic development tools. In the hard copy, you'll see several modifying words that were put in front of the approach here. This is the idea that we would have sort of a guide map of when we would use and the conditions under which we would use certain economic development tools to send indications to the development community on what types of things we would support and how we would support them. The next one, one major 3 C's project. I think I get these 3 C's wrong, but it's cooperate, consolidate.
It's cooperate, collaborate, consolidate.
It is all of those C's. So this is very similar to identify one major consolidation project, which was the DUCOM project of last year. It doesn't necessarily have to be consolidation. It
Well,
could be
correct.
together.
Correct. It could be, and the idea isn't just to do it for the sake of doing it. The idea is to do it where it makes sense because it either maintains, enhances service levels, or has a short-term or long-term cost reduction benefit, or stemming cost increases.
The next one has to do with the other side of our budget on the revenue side. It's a continuation and growth of the discussion about maintaining sustainable revenues. The idea here is a lot of our current revenues were born out of the post-World War II economy, and a lot of those revenue sources aren't keeping paces with expenses. We talked about this issue extensively a couple months ago. This would be a continuation of that, looking for revenues that would be supported by the local modern economy and be sustainable. Publicly funded art program is exactly what it would suggest, public beautification in the village of Downers Grove funded through some sort of public means. The next one, reduce public safety costs. This is born out of the discussion that we know these core services are key cost drivers. They're our top expenses. This idea was, could we look to actively look to reduce public safety costs to maintain financial sustainability. Gateway sign replacements. This was last discussed in 2015, where we got very far on this project, and then it was not fulfilled due to budgetary constraints. This is replacing a variety of gateway signs that were installed over the years. Some of them well maintained, some of them not well maintained. This would be, as you come in, welcome to Downers Grove type signs. Street section standardization. Our streets are designed with a variety of different, there aren't any standards, so to speak. We have some with curb and gutter, we have some without, we have some with ditch cross sections, we have some with lights and some without lights, etc., which is to be expected of a village that's over 175 years old. The idea here is to have a set of standards by which when we go in and touch a street, whether do maintenance or reconstruction, that we would have standards that we would apply to all streets. Expand the Parkway tree planting program. This has been talked about over the years in many different forms. We have an extensive Parkway tree program right now, but the idea here is, could this program be changed, augmented, things like maybe we could plant more trees with input from residents on a 50-50 type cost share program. Could we grow the number of trees totally in the system? How would we do that? Who would we partner with? Those types of things. The next one, reestablish Human Services Commission Partnership Program. This actually appears on our current long-range planning priority action item, and it has not been started yet, but this has its roots back 4 or 5 years ago. The Human Services Commission has been inactive for many years, and the idea here is to reactivate them and identify the projects that they would do that would support our long-range plan. Create an emergency response volunteer corps, just as the name suggests, in support of our own full-time and part-time employees that do emergency response. Could we have resident volunteers that help us? We would have to train them, set up a program, etc. The next one, implement comprehensive plan recommendations for the Fairview focus area. Our comprehensive plan update is just a couple of months old. It has several recommendations. The idea here is that the village would actively facilitate and take a lead role, much like we did in the downtown starting in the 1990s. maybe not the exact same program, but the same type of approach. Not a passive approach, not an opportunistic approach, but a proactive approach. We're going to play a lead role. And the last one, I think everybody on the council knows what the facility sustainability plan is and where we are on that.
May I make a comment?
Absolutely. Thank you for the overview.
Thank you.
Any questions about the overview?
Well, this is kind of comment sort of about the overview. Although there's some questions about specific ones, but looking at this and thinking about this quite a while before we came this evening, my opinion is that there are 5 topics or areas that I believe that need to be addressed in the next 20 months. These are the topics, and then there's overlap. Some of these action items could fall in more than one area. Okay. The 5 that I have: fiscal sustainability and economic development. And this goes back to how you count to 12, and should you count to 12, and how big things are. So how much bandwidth that takes is not entirely clear. But economic fiscal sustainability, the future of downtown, stormwater regulations, complete the zoning map, updating for the entire village, including potentially a community-wide discussion of design review concepts, which makes that a little bit bigger than it was first up there. And then kind of what I see is a tool to accomplish those others, but also accomplish one of the things is to enhance engagement with boards and commissioners, including specifically, as many of you know, the Economic Development Commission, that we engage more collaboratively. And there's a lot of items up here. And to talk a little bit what I mean about overlap, I'm going to jump to the Fairview focus area one, very specifically, and how it applies to a number of things. It would impact fiscal sustainability and economic development because there's a potential for a TIF district that would grow our local economy. It also involves a zoning map update, because we are potentially updating the Fairview area of the zoning map potentially. And if we were to develop that in collaboration with DDC, we're also enhancing engagements with other boards and commissions. So that one project really could fall under 3 categories simultaneously. So basically, though, but we got these 5 categories, and then we'd have to fit the things into them. And the other ones are kind of one-offs. If there's time to do them, maybe do them, but basically just fit everything into those, and then pick and choose of these that fit into the categories. But I kind of want to do all the economic development ones, all the future downtown ones, both of the stormwater ones, finish the zoning map with design review, and then fit, put the big rocks in first, and then fit the smaller rocks in later.
So, Phil, I tried to follow your line of thinking, putting purple check marks, interpreting, according to Dave, interpretation to get us further in. I'm wondering, are you saying that would include a check mark on Fairview?
Well, Fairview is one that we could achieve 3 separate topics with the one specific one.
Right. So what I heard from that then is the proposal is these 5 plus these here with these check marks.
Oh, and facility sustainability is a subset of the future downtown, because that is an issue no matter what. Even, and I think we have a plan.
Yeah, we do. The current plan is to readdress it in 2018.
Yeah.
The only thing I want to mention about that, I'm going to steal this word, meta-comment. It should be a comment about a comment. Not to be confused with metadata. The enhanced engagement of board and commission members, and I know you know this, is much broader.
Oh, yes.
It's not just engaging one board and commission, it's fundamentally taking all our boards and commissions and making sure that all the members have updated training and information regarding what expectations are and their alignment with what the village council's mission is, as well as these things. It's something that we've done before, but frankly, for a variety of reasons, including logistics and resources, it has not been as done as frequently as it would. And you might think this is a one-time shot, but number one, it takes a lot of planning. It is a big undertaking, but I think very valuable because we rely so heavily upon all of our boards and commissions, even the ones that have to be reinitiated, to provide guidance. And it's really a conduit from the community, another conduit from the community to the council, to staff, as to what's important in terms of things to address. We often view them as, I don't want to say canaries in a coal mine, but they oftentimes will flag things before they come to our attention, and there's oftentimes that we rely upon their expertise as volunteers to give us very valuable insights on specialized topics, and to make sure that we're, let's just say that it's an engine that needs to be tuned periodically to ensure that it's running at its best efficiency. So I agree with that one. It's just broader than just
Oh, sure.
the EDC.
But what I'm saying, though, is that in the scope of accomplishing a proactive development plan,
I understand.
we can actually check off a lot of boxes with one item.
Yeah, and that's been our experience with a lot of these, because these priority actions are all designed to implement these 5 goals that we've had for years. It almost feels like staff is working on one giant interrelated project. That happens quite a bit over the years. Sometimes we have one-offs that are distinct, but usually we find synergy in these. So I took that as a proposal that the items with the purple check mark are on the table, and just wanted to sort of get reaction from the council on that.
Well, you know me, I always add a check mark to the 3 Cs if one is identified and makes sense.
See, what I say about that, my opinion is that we should have our eyes open. If there's an opportunity, seize it, but don't spend a lot of time looking for an opportunity. I mean, don't spend a lot of energy hunting out an opportunity, but if one comes across, if the opportunity exists, then absolutely jump on it and do it.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree with that, and I think that's why I use the word identify, because it's not manufacture.
I got no problem checking it. It's just
It's identify when they present. Sometimes they present themselves, and sometimes we connect the dots for others. But I think, again, this is almost something you do as a matter of course now.
That's the key.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
It's part of our
what's going
DNA.
on. It's in the DNA. We're doing this. I mean, the fact of the matter is that last one got rammed down our throat. We can talk about achieving a goal. We'd have a choice on it. We're doing this as a matter of our DNA all the time. And I don't think it...
We're constantly looking. What's interesting is sometimes one of them will come up that's so big, it has the elements and characteristics of a priority action on it. Multiple departments requiring a long time frame, requiring policy direction, which are the criteria, by the way, for a priority action item. So when we stumble across one or actively cultivate one, we would never hesitate as a staff to bring it forward and say, hey, let's do this.
Yes, and just, again, to wrap this up, because I don't disagree with what's been said, and I don't think we need to make it a separate category. I think that the identifying and pursuing a major 3C when it makes sense really falls under stewards of financial, environmental, and neighborhood sustainability and continual innovation.
A little nitpicking. Continual innovation is a tool to an end, not an end in itself.
Yeah, we had that discussion when that was identified, and it was interesting that the council said it is a goal in and of itself because it sort of gets into our DNA.
Actually, I already said more than I should have, so we'll forget about that. We'll leave it be.
So I've definitely said too much, so I'm going to stop.
I'm going to put a check mark here and say this is sort of let's just call it the list that is before us now for further discussion.
Well, and it is also an ends to a means. It's a means to an ends too. I agree.
Yes.
Look at Aristotle's 4 causes.
Well, this may be tilting at a windmill, but I think we have to continue with facilities. I think having a plan to revisit it in 2018 or any other year is not a plan. We have to solve these challenges. We've known about them for a decade or more. We had 4, what I think were all good options of various stripes of good. But if we're living on borrowed time with the police station and with Village Hall, and if we pour $1 in terms of repairs into either building, we are wasting tax dollars. Period, end of story. And if we continue to kick the can, sooner or later that's going to happen. And if it does, I think we're derelict in our duty. So I think that has to be on the list. Absent that, I agree, amending stormwater regulations, as I've said before, it is the universal issue. I understand from discussions with staff that if you do facilities, you probably shouldn't do stormwater because they are both very large, and I appreciate that. So I would be willing to put stormwater aside if necessary. In terms of economic development tools, identifying new revenue sources, I think those absolutely go hand in hand with some of the focuses on the left here, as Commissioner White said. It goes right with developing a plan for the OPEB unfunded liability, for EDC implementation of the strategic plan and sales tax plan. The economic development always has to be a priority. Changing topics a little bit, it kind of goes along with stormwater, but I like the idea of expanding parkway tree planting. It has stormwater benefits, and we're Downers Grove for a reason.
So let me just,
Sure.
I think, did I hear you say everything with a purple check mark is done objecting to that? Support those?
Want to add to it, you don't want to remove anything.
Yeah, I'm not saying remove anything at the
Right.
moment. I mean,
All
if
right.
we need to
So
start
I'm gonna-
negotiating, I'm willing to negotiate.
I'm going to do this.
With regard to implementing the comp plan recommendations for Fairview, I live in the Fairview focus area, so of course I don't have a problem with that. But if
Maybe
there's
we have a
another
project manager on that one.
Did I just volunteer for something else? If there's another area that the village and the EDC would identify as a higher priority, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say it's got to be Fairview.
So let me comment on it.
Much as I might like it.
So this item that we've agreed to, the EDC implementation of their strategic plan, which we as a village had a great role in helping them draft. They, in this strat plan, they actually have corridor by corridor prioritized areas. This is not in this plan. So if you keep this on the list and you add to it this, it's everything in priority order on the EDC strat plan that they go off and lead.
Plus that.
And then we lead this one.
Got it.
This one, I don't think has as much direct short-term revenue growth as the items in this one. Right, because there's less commercial identified in this plan. It's good for the tax base, it's good for community development and neighborhood redevelopment and traffic and all sorts of stuff. But this is less of an economic development focus. This is more community development. They have a long list of items in the strat plan, EDC strat plan.
The other thing that I'm really interested in, and I think it's a longer conversation that may go a whole lot of nowhere, but street section standardization. I think we should go down that road. I think it's a tough conversation, but you talk to folks, and I have had a number of folks say to me, when am I going to get curb and gutter? And we've heard it from the dais multiple times over the last couple of years. And it's a tough conversation to have with people to tell them the answer might be never, or at least not in the foreseeable future. I actually had one resident ask me when her street was going to grow up to be a big boy street. When she got her answer, they ended up moving to what she considered a big boy street, thankfully still within the village of Downers Grove. But I think because we're a village, like you said, we're as old as we are. We developed in different times, through different eras, and in different ways. But we can, I think, set a vision for the lights, the stormwater management, the roads. It might take us a very long time to get there, but sidewalks took a really long time. We got it done. It takes some additional budgeting and a lot of vision, but I think we can do it.
Well, it's more than that, and I'm glad you mentioned sidewalks. And I'm not saying yay or nay to this. Just adding some context to it is the sidewalk program was an outpouring of a TCD, Public Community Development, village-wide series of meetings that came out in favor of, yes, long-term, in 20 years, fund on an annual basis and work your way to the list to actually put a sidewalk on one side of every street. And street section standardization, I think, has to begin with that, because as we know from the history of sidewalks, everybody agrees with that. There were streets that fought tooth and nail against sidewalks. And likewise, we know that there are as many people who say, when am I going to get a big boy street? Or also, don't you dare change the rural character of my neighborhood.
Which is one of the reasons why I prefaced the comment saying it may be a conversation that doesn't go anywhere.
Well, no. It may be a conversation because it comes up all the time, like other things. Stickers, totes, Cubs, socks. It comes up, and people have different views. To me, it really is, what does the community want? Do the community want street section standardization, which, let's talk about what that is. It's a substantial capital investment, because once you're doing curb and gutter, you're also doing the stormwater, you're doing everything else that goes with it. You're not just putting in ribbons of concrete. Typically, sometimes yes, but that's a big conversation, and I'm not saying because it's a big conversation we shouldn't have it, but it is really a total community direction type of, is this what we want our community to be long-term? And are we as a community willing to commit the long-term annual dollars to make it happen, understanding that there's no way, like with the sidewalk program, it's going to happen overnight? Because it would be, not only, we'd have a matrix, presumably, we'd have to work through it, but we would have to approach these projects as they came up. We wouldn't just start tearing up brand new streets because they didn't have curb and gutter.
I completely agree. And as the result of the conversation, it may be we decide that we're not going to do any standardization.
Correct.
Once you-
That's all I'm
and
getting at. Is I think there's a
something we should accept if that's
preliminary
the
step.
outcome.
There's a preliminary step, which is having that community conversation and finding out what the community wants. We may find out the community wants it. We may find out the community doesn't want it. We may find out that we literally have the Hatfields and McCoys. I don't know, but I think that's a first step to whether to do that or not. Because if the community says, look, we want to make that investment long term, then by God, that's what the community wants.
So Greg, I put your name down as yes on these 7 in purple. And then these 2 are separate colors. I'm not trying to work through that.
But I would call that, it's not just street section standardization, because that suggests if we say yes, we're going to do it. I think what I'm getting at is it would be determining whether or not that is a community objective.
So there's a lot of shorthand going on. When these things actually get run up, many of them use the word explore this concept, consider this concept, not saying this is an outcome, something this big. It's not, we are going to standardize streets.
Right.
So a lot of these consider the reestablishment, consider expanding. None of these are taken as directive. We develop a scope, we ask the fundamental questions first. So we should assume that all of these are not a direct outcome.
Right. Although some of these are not explored.
Yes.
We got to do that.
Could I get some expanded information on Parkway tree planting? I mean, what would you be thinking about? Just putting in more trees? I mean, we replace what we take out. So what is the goal? Closer together? I'm unsure as to what expand Parkway tree planting means.
That was presented by Commissioner Barnett. Because you presented it.
I don't have necessarily an objection to it. I just would like to know what it means.
It was, the premise there is that we generally have what you talked about. We basically replace what we take out. And I think most residents only really even know that we're on that system when their property or their neighbor's property is engaged in some way like that. This is suggesting that we would put forth village resources, communication primarily, but village resources to make sure that everybody, whatever that might mean, knew that this program existed, cooperative participation on tree purchases and tree plantings, and would expand rather than just when we're taking them out. There are a lot of places in town where there are not the same frequency of trees as others, because we've got 170 years of development. And so right now, most residents, I don't think, know that this program exists. And it may be the kind of thing the village just basically partners up with somebody, like PDHA, and says, let's get it done.
But to that point, for the last 3 or 4 years, PDHA has been going out on behalf of the village, doing the survey to where they can put new trees. So it just seems like we're already trying to do that. I just don't know what further we can...
I put it on the list because I don't think we're doing it very effectively. I think collectively the village and PDHA is getting into the technical details and understanding what the right course is, but I don't think we're engaging enough disinterested or marginally interested residents so to get them to want to participate.
And I don't disagree, because I know there's Public Works has flat out said, there's this list of people who flat out say they don't want trees, and they call every year to make sure they're on that list. Well, that's fine and dandy, but there's turnover at some point in the house, and I've I've said, do we send a postcard? Do we keep track of,
Sure.
people who are on that list? Is it checked reasonably often? At some point, maybe the resident has moved out or moved on or has passed, unfortunately, and whoever's in there now is somebody different. So I think that conversation has been, I know that conversation has been had because I've had it. I just don't know if it needs to be on this list, as much as I am for pro-parkway tree planting. I just don't know that it belongs on this list. So
The items that I had were at the solicitation of Dave for ideas. And so
I'm
certainly
just trying to.
Some of them maybe don't rise to that HPIA kind of level, but that was the logic behind it, was that we
Okay.
probably could do more to engage people proactively.
When I first joined council, trees and the planting of trees was a big priority. Each council member had a lot of interaction from Castine and her explaining the program and what was going on and the importance of maintenance and all that. So I think before we add something and piecemeal try and think that we know what's going on with the program and what the status is, I think before we get into this specifically, that maybe we take a meeting and go in the committee room or even at the podium and have our village forester kind of explain what's going on.
Yeah, we can do that. We'd take
It's
that.
an education for the council and the village.
We might even make a little short-form video on that one.
There we go.
There you go.
And I remember that era. One of the reasons we were doing that is because there were actually proposals on the table from council members to significantly extend the maintenance periods, and reduce planting. And so we had a real extensive dialogue at that time at the committee levels to sort of explain. And we haven't had that issue come up, and we've been sustainable.
Two things. Bill's right. I think it's time for that, like we used to have the road show in the streets. I think it's time for the leaf show. I think, Bill, you're absolutely right. I think it would be good to see that again, because enough time has passed. But I have a feeling there's going to be a number of short-form videos that are going to come out of tonight's conversation.
Doug's going to be busy.
He's furious.
The Emmy Award winning.
I'm going to weigh in on this topic that I like the idea of expanding, expanding find a way to expand the tree canopy. I think this falls somewhere between the 20 minutes it took to fix the ethics ordinance and a true long-range action item. But I do think we can probably solve this on new business without it being.
So for that reason, unless I see anybody throwing their hands up, I'm going to cross this one out, but it's something we're not doing it. We're just going to take it in a different direction with some information.
With a lot less commitment. I mean, we can do it with a lot less bandwidth, but we can do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. I think we all agree that it's a good idea. I think it just
We'll
doesn't
start
need
with
to
the
be.
awareness.
Yeah.
Like food trucks will take 4 meetings, we're done.
And
4 minutes.
another thing, one of the things mentioned was the Fairview focus area.
Give you a
And
pen.
I think that's important. But also included in there is like the closing of or affecting or closing of the train crossing. And I'd be totally opposed to that again, and again. As a matter of fact, since we've had the comp plan and Maple was considered a minor arterial or collector, somewhere in there, I think it's been considered both. I would almost consider reevaluating the crosswalks along the way, but definitely not changing the pattern for traffic to make it more difficult to go down Maple Avenue. So, but as far as the economic development of the area, I'm totally in agreement with that. And I'd also, based on our conversation tonight, like to add another one that's almost like Fairview, is going over plans and requirements for our catalyst sites before we get another project that gives us the same old, same old. So we should include Meadowbrook and 75th and Lamont. Butterfield, yeah, start looking at requirements for those areas so we don't have to worry about building a town of Ephesus that looks like a Hollywood set. Let's start, if we're going to I just don't like the idea of accepting anything and everything because it matches code. Then we need to, comment was, we need to change the code, let's get to it. And that would be a big item.
Yeah, that would be a big item. And
Big.
again, to what I said earlier, if that's what the council wants to do, so be it, but I wouldn't limit it to the catalyst sites. The catalyst sites, to me, are more, those are places we want to spark redevelopment. It's less about the aesthetics, it's more about getting something going there. The aesthetics ought to be village-wide. Why would you limit it to the catalyst sites? Right.
Well, the idea
Those
that
commercial buildings.
you're doing it
Right.
for the downtown, or we're talking about doing it for the downtown, setting up some sort of standards. So we can do that for the other
catalyst sites, I don't think we want to have that kind of pocket zoning, for lack of a better word, but my point is, we want to raise standards about materials, design, aesthetics, and that ought to be, I hate to say how the sign ordinance started. It started off as, let's just fix Ogden Avenue. Next thing, that was 18 months later, and we had a village-wide, yes, thank you, I still have the scars from that. It was 18 months later, and we had, yes, I know.
We all bear scars from that.
And we had the village-wide sign ordinance.
So one of the reasons you might want to start with the catalyst sites is because many of them came to be in the comp plan because there was a concern that they were both economically, so functionally obsolete, but physically obsolete and were eyesores. And so there is a connection here. Certainly, that project for village-wide design standards would be huge. This might be a great lead-in if the council wanted to start small, and there's a logical tie-in because we've already said, hey, these sites need some help. They're underperforming. Maybe they don't look so great. In fact, I was rereading the Meadowbrook comments. It actually talked about appearance, right? And so a lot of these, so this makes sense from this former planner that if you're going to start a project like this, it might be the best place to start is catalyst sites.
You could do it a pilot program consistent with applicable land use laws, not making it impossible or unenforceable, which we don't want to do.
See, this actually, to my mind, ties into the implementation of the EDC strategic plan, and when there are plans to redevelop catalyst sites, involve all of council earlier. Because part of what happened this evening with Meadowbrook is that the facade improvements were negotiated without all of council knowing what those terms were. And then they're presented to council already negotiated. So if there's greater interaction between EDC and council early on, we can avoid these 11th hour disagreements over how buildings look. Because it's a lot easier with the developer to tell them 9 months before they file, we don't like this, than it is 9 minutes before we're supposed to pass it.
But we should come up with the same result.
That sort of presumes that we all are in agreement that we should be negotiating on those kinds of subjects, and I'm certainly not, so just make sure that's clear.
Well, I'm not entirely sure it was the EDC that negotiated that either, but I think that's a question we can handle offline.
But going to the strat plan catalyst sites to start is a good place to start. And the cap plan.
I want to make sure that the staff understands why the mayor is hesitating on this, because it's not as simple as just, because there's some land use law intricacies.
Well, there's land use issue, and again, I'm not saying this is reasons to take it out back and shoot it, but I'm just trying to say there are legit land use law issues, and what you can just say, it's not just a map you can start painting here, here, and here. You run into all kinds of different issues. It's become very complicated. The other thing that I just want to point out is that in the sign ordinance, one of the problems is when you say catalyst sites, let's remember the catalyst sites are all over different parts of towns, and what might be an aesthetic downtown is going to be completely different than Butterfield Road, completely different than 63rd and Woodward, completely different than 75th Avenue, completely different. It's just different. Ogden is not 75th Street. Downtown is not Butterfield. And people started struggling with this where you can't have a one-size-fits-all. And then you start saying, well, okay, well, here where we have these big open spaces up on the north side of town, well, I'm okay with this, this, and this. But downtown, when it's right up to me, well, I need a different standard. And I'm not saying that that's impossible. It's just much more challenging. And then you have to be able to do that in a way that respects different places in fair and equitable manners. You can't just say, again, I'm not saying it can't be done.
So then are you saying not just, so maybe it's commercial and maybe it starts as something just minimal, it needs to be
Yeah.
less than 50% EFS, and it needs less, nothing that's so,
Maybe,
I think maybe the
onerous.
subjective information.
Maybe this will help as a way not to discuss the item here tonight, but whether we should put it on the list for further discussion. Let me give you an example where we've actually already done it before and it worked. We identified 5100 Forest as a catalyst site in our original comp plan. And it said this site should redevelop with these type of uses consistent with the zoning. And in addition to that, it said it should have a terminating vista, which is planner term for look good when you're looking at it down the street, like in Europe,
right,
or Washington, D.C. And so when 3 different applicants came through for zoning approvals, we applied the standard of does it have a terminating vista. So that fit really nicely into, it wasn't into materials, it wasn't into this, it wasn't violating zoning, it wasn't all. So that's just one example that might help frame up whether this stays on the list or not.
Just one very quick comment, explaining early in the process why certain considerations can't be done because of zoning law considerations is better than trying to explain late in the process why certain considerations can't be taken into account. Yeah.
Fair point. Understood.
So, yeah, it's complex. It's going to take some time. That's why it's on a priority list. Needs to be done, and it's complicated.
And it has synergy with other ones up there, so I'm not convinced it's a brand, it's its own item, but yes, that's a good way to say it. Like, for example, the downtown parking and traffic study is part of the future of downtown. We don't need a separate item for it because it's part of it.
Right.
It's part of it.
We're going to boil everything tonight down to one high priority action. Do good.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's right, just do good.
And a quick comment on standardization. I think years ago we were talking about housing and the variety, and the mayor kind of addressed some of that. You know, people want sidewalks, they don't want sidewalks. They want trees, they don't want trees. They like tall buildings, they don't like tall buildings. I mean, and handrails and all these things. And I think one of the nice things about our Public Works Department is you look at something and you see a challenge and you adapt to it. And so you don't have to standardize handrails and you don't have to standardize steps. You do, you have some basic rules of zoning and building codes and the like. So those are standard, but within those standards, you can adapt handrails. You can make it out of different materials, and it's that flexibility that makes Downers Grove Downers Grove. You can, like street lights, you can have them, what do you call it, battery operated, run by the sun. Electricity. I mean, there's just a zillion things that you can adapt and try. I mean, if you standardized everything, would we have and whether you like it or not, the Grove Street, the pavers using different streets. So I think trying to tell everybody, okay, everybody gets curb and gutter, and everybody gets this,
and nobody gets EFS.
Should we be concerned the architect in the room just ran out the door?
Probably thought we're all nuts.
Well, fine.
That street section thing, there's more to it than curb and gutter. Curb and gutter is where we focus because that's where the money is. But there's a lot more to it than that, and I'd suggest that we have a comp plan that has a series of goals that we're not hitting as hard as we could because we don't really have a plan in this. Just throw curb and gutter out. We talk about pedestrian mobility and we talk about bike access, alternative means of transportation. We also talk about traffic control. And those are all the types of elements that you might build into such a plan, even if you weren't doing curb and gutter. If you said we're not even going to touch the curb and gutter issue, you still would have a host of opportunities to further elements that are called out as priorities within our comp plan by developing some standards by which we build streets. And it wouldn't be, my vision for this, Martin, isn't a matrix. It's not that at all. It's just a matter of we've got a 15 or 20 year likely plan of street requirements. And as you hit those, you do them differently, that's all. It's not a...
Right, well, but that would be a matrix in that would be the matrix.
You wouldn't well,
So
except
you
that
have your
that's
list
driven,
of-
but that's driven by other things. The sidewalk maintenance is largely driven by the desire to have sidewalks. Our street thing is driven by actual observations of wear. It's driven by other utilities. It's driven by a host of things that don't.
Yes, although, our current policy is to basically replace what's there with what's there.
Right.
If you're going to change that,
Yeah, that's what this.
now it's more like the sidewalk matrix, where you're saying, look, you're getting a sidewalk whether you like it or not.
Yeah, we're probably crossing each other on the word matrix.
So let me throw this out, based on this discussion, I've interpreted, taking the liberty of putting up on the board, create a street design plan. In a former life, I worked on a project that was very much went like this. Hey, when the village is about to touch a street, do maintenance work on it, rebuild it, what does that street look like? And in that community, it was very important that each street retained its character or had a discussion about whether we're actively going to change its character and design. And
Right.
that's what I'm thinking we're hearing.
Yeah, and that's all I'm trying to explain here is that, for example, if you have a narrower street in town, and heck, we had this conversation not too long ago. You have a narrower street, you may end up, if you have these standards, you may end up widening that street, which now reduces the right-of-way, so suddenly people are closer to the public way, and you may actually have to lose some, I don't know, maybe, it does change the character of the street. It could mean changing the grading, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. And again, all these things are once you start standardizing things, you have to take into account that some folks may say, well, hey, I like it this way. I don't want my street to look like the big boy street. That's why I live on this street.
So with that in mind...
I'm just saying, I think there's value in having that conversation.
Right, so with that in mind, if it's
Absolutely
okay with the proposer, this could be create a street, also right-of-way. It's more than just the streets. It's a right-of-way design plan. It ties very much to one of our goals of steward of neighborhood sustainability. And choosing the types of street that fit each neighborhood is, I think, what's embedded here. Some would be standardized, some would be
Yes.
unique.
And let's not forget, we have real experience with some streets where when we went in to do work, folks were given the opportunity for cost sharing. So where if everybody kicked in a few, well, it was more than a few bucks, but if everybody kicked in some bucks, they could get the street with curb and gutter and all these bells and whistles. And when push came to shove, it was, no thank you, I don't want to pay for it. Now, broaden that out to the entire community, and that's the conversation we're talking about.
Did I capture that, Bob, that this is not necessarily standardize everything, but it's have a discussion so that the expectations of what we're going to do where if we start to touch a right-of-way.
Yeah, it's hard to capture it in 4 words on the board. We are getting hung up in high-cost curb and gutter conversation, and I'm just suggesting there's a lot more to it.
Well, there is a lot more to it, which there is a cost element to. So, for example, if you take a street that has no curb and gutter, and it's narrower than our requirements, whatever those are, and we go and repave it, some people's expectation would be you're just going to repave the street and it's going to look just like it always has, but better. Other people's expectation might be, well, I want it widened, which means now my right-of-way is smaller and there may be trees impacted, who knows what. There's going to be a curb, and when you're going to do the curb, now you're going to think about putting in drainage systems, which again can be very good because that's another issue.
Back to curb and
But it completely changes what it might look like.
Regurgitating the conversation, there's a lot of elements other than high-cost elements that go into a street design that may further other goals that exist today in the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
Well, but there's
Yes.
also, when you do some of those things, you get then the reverse. Oh, now you've got a license to drive faster because things are further away, things are more streamlined. You know, there's something to be said for those narrow little streets sometimes because people drive slower because they have to. It's a give and take.
So that...
Natural traffic calming, so.
Is it that
Well,
important that we have, in the grand scheme of things, that we have to put this on a priority item for this coming year? Since it's complex, it's going to take time, and in the overall scheme of things, is it?
Not in my books.
Well, it's a conversation we've had multiple times in the last couple of years.
And we're spending millions every year on street work.
So I'm just
And
going
we would
to...
have spent millions more.
The only thing I want to make clear is that if
Or
we're
not, or to Greg's point, or not. If we have the conversation, we might
It could
say
be we
no.
have a conversation and decide that the the policy is fine the way it is.
So I think
But the fact
Commissioner
that the
Waldeck
question keeps
just
coming
asked
up,
the operative question for tonight's discussion, which is this
Do we do
being considered anymore at this point to put on our list of where staff is going to spend its time in the next 20 months?
Not in my book.
I don't know if it's a TCD4 or what it is, but to me, we really got to get some input on the question of, and forget about cost for a second. If we go into your street, is it going to look fundamentally different than it does now because now it's going to meet all these other things, or is it going to be the same?
So should
There is a cost element to it.
Should we start to ask should it be on our list?
To me, that's the question.
Should we start the process or not, is the question. With limited resources and you're pointing us in the direction, the question is this on our list?
When did we do TCD3?
Here, I'll toss in why I think it should not be on the list right now, is that I'm optimistic that we're going to pull the trigger on a facility sustainability plan within the next 3 or 4 years, and I don't know if we can finish it before we knock down Village Hall. And that's... So it's important to do, but I don't think we can get it done if, in fact, sometime in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, we agree to move forward on facilities. I want to get done the things we got to get done before we knock this building down.
And I just think some of these other things are going to take a lot more effort. So everything for me in purple, I'm in agreement with.
And then that's, I don't want to jump the gun here, but was that a...
I like the idea. I don't think we have time between now and then.
I agree. I feel like some of
And then
these
we'll
other action items are going to take a little bit more time and manpower. For me, facilities at this point in time, I had stormwater up there. That was one that I threw out there. And for me, I think due to our last discussion on facilities, this is the perfect time to deal with stormwater, which continues to be an issue. We continue to have people approach us at Coffee with the Council, in all these other public places, still struggling with these stormwater issues. And I just feel like we really need to take care of that. I'm all for the enhancing engagement of board and commission members. I think that's an excellent idea, and from what I understand, it is a large undertaking. However, we have these wonderful volunteers that come out to, to help us out, and I think the more informed they are, the more united they are, the better they can work together, the better that it becomes for us when they make their decisions. So that's where I'm at.
Okay.
I can do purple without messing with Maple Avenue.
Got it. And that's more in...
Right. For the moment, facilities I'm done with, so no. Reestablishing the Human Services Commission partnership has some interest for me.
We discuss that when we have a moment.
I'm just going up the list. So gateway signs, I'm not interested really in going there yet.
Let's just take a brief. Gateway signs still on the list for anybody? Obviously a great project we went very far on in 15.
It's on my list.
I mean, I'd love to do it, but
Reading from the bottom
we're on
up.
gas every time.
Right.
I'd go there, but it seems it's losing.
Why are we running out of gas every time? It's like 80% done. Just do it.
Except for the money.
So let's do it piecemeal.
So let's go. I didn't mean to
Except for the
I
money.
didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't
Like
mean
I
to
said,
have to-
every time on the street.
Well, let's spend $80,000 here and $20,000.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Earl had the floor. I
It's like that all the time.
Okay.
It's okay.
Anything else, Marge? So I heard another council member say yes to support for the purple. There's a caveat on this in the scope and this one on Fairview. I'm keeping notes on. And then Marge also said, hey, maybe this one deserves some further discussion. Okay.
That's it for the moment.
Can we talk about the Human Services Commission?
Sure. As far as I'm concerned.
I personally would like to either move forward on that or to take it off the list. It's been years, and it has no mission, it has no members.
and it's been on this list, but I would like as a council either make a decision that we're going to move forward with a Human Services Commission, give it a mission, and appoint some people and do stuff, hopefully good stuff, or then let's say it's not going to happen. And I'm not going to cast or lay any blame. Let's move forward on it, but I would really like this council to act on this or decide we're not going to act on it. Because it's been a lingering question. I'm glad Marge raised it. I hear we have a chicken and the egg problem of, well, I don't want to appoint any people until we have a mission, but we can't get a mission because we don't have people feeding into it. And just to get the ball rolling, you may recall a year ago that after coming back from National League of Cities in Nashville, I laid out a number of things that we might consider as something we could do. I believe 3 of those were all Human Services Commission-esque type of things. Nobody ever, I mean, a lot of polite nodding, thank you very much for going and sharing that with us, but my challenge to this group is let's either go forward with it, come up with a mission, and appoint some people, put them to the task. Now we've got the giving due page element of it, and I think there's things that could be done here. I don't think they're going to suffer from lack of a mission. I think what they're suffering from is a lack of direction. And again, whether it's this council, prior councils, doesn't matter. But from a going forward standpoint, I'd like to have a conversation about either let's give them a mission, appoint some people, move forward, or let's forget about it.
Well, in the same vein,
There has been discussion, and moving that part forward, there should be some new applicants since the last time it was published. So if I get a list of the current applicants, I can make sure that the people who said they were interested have actually gone through the process. And that's kind of where it's at. It's in the middle. It has been brought forward publicly, but...
Mayor, I put this on this list every year for the last almost 7 years. Prior to your trip out to the NLC, I actually had a specific proposal that I tried to float, and it was shit can, for lack of a better choice of words. This is something that we should be doing, and I think I can't understand why we're not. But to your point, this group, this body has to decide whether there's applicants or not. You're not going to point them.
Well, the reality is,
don't know what to do.
and I'm not blaming anybody because the last 2 councils we didn't get anywhere on this. I brought this up every year. Let's appoint some people to move forward. So I'm not blaming anybody. That's not productive going forward. The question now is if I've got a commitment from this group to recommend appointees, I'll be happy to appoint them for everyone to vote on, and then let's give them a mission and go.
And I made that,
There's stuff for them to do.
I made that commitment, and there has been some meetings.
What I would suggest for purpose of this evening, I see this, and maybe others won't agree with me, as being sort of a larger version of like the Parkway tree thing. I say we don't put it on the list. It's not a priority action item. But if a really strong, compelling human services mission arises, we can probably act very quickly
We can reconsider
and do it as a new business thing, and then just do it.
Well,
but only when we got a compelling reason.
because underneath it is create emergency response volunteer force. Isn't that something that a Human Services Commission could look at right off the bat?
I would actually put this, my understanding, based on what the Human Services Commission had done historically.
But does that mean that that's what they're locked into?
No.
I partially agree with you because I don't think it's a high priority action item, but I'm glad you brought it up because I want to have this conversation anyway. Is we have an existing ordinance that talks about this commission. We don't have to create one. We can just do it.
So I propose, since we're in the middle of this process right now,
High priority action item.
the proposal then is to actually just circulate the names that have applied.
Right.
We're doing that right now, anyway, and all the other ones, with a goal towards actually establishing them. Let's have them meet, and then if they, under their current mission as described in the ordinance, if they come up with something they want to do that rises to the level of a priority action, we'll bring it to the council for an update and say, hey, we've already had. Right? Good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aces.
If it's a compelling mission, then we'll
Yep.
grab it and run
Yeah,
with
I
it.
think the issue is just making sure that they understand where to take it. And that has been the question.
Yeah.
And we would even
At
propose
hand.
a couple of ideas that have come up from.
Right,
Brian
and I think that that would be very helpful.
Yes, let's seed them with some
So,
ideas, then let's
right.
get their input.
So even
on
if
what-
they don't initially have a mission, we need to at least give them direction
Okay.
in some way.
Direct, we'll take that as direction from the council. There's
Not
nobody's
for
saying
this,
no.
but you're...
Not on this priority, but it's a task list that we're going to move forward on immediately.
Okay.
Okay, so let's just do a little quick
50%
check.
of something is better than 100% of nothing.
Absolutely.
Incremental steps.
Fight my thought.
So we have really good council support for, I think almost everybody's commented on most of the items in purple, which actually would give us
12.
a really good target place to start the discussion.
You don't have a check mark that's got any BBs by it, kind of jumping on something.
I thought they were usually RTVs.
That's right.
That reduced public safety cost thing. We've got, whether you want to lump them underneath an umbrella or not, we've got about 4 or 5 things up here that all talk about financial sustainability and financial challenges that we see in front of us. They range from revenue sources to the implementation of strat plan and sales tax plan. They all focus, though, on the revenue side of things. And I don't think that's us doing enough work. Fair enough, maybe that's it. And they may, as we said, that may well be a means to an end in many cases. But that the truth of the matter is, if you want to talk, Greg, about an uncomfortable conversation, this is certainly one. But what I'm suggesting is that we understand fully what those options might look like. Similar to streets, we may decide we don't like those options, we're uncomfortable with them, and we're just not willing to engage in them. But I don't think we're doing our job completely if we're not fully vetting out the cost side the same as we're doing the revenue side. And right now, everything for a while has been focused on revenue. And so we've touched on this with, service levels, we've touched on it in a variety of ways and never really felt compelled to dig in. And I think we need to dig in. And what the point of that is, it says reduce public safety costs. It really means study and understand the options that may be available to us to do so. That's what it really means. We all know the math. That's 75% of our cost. It's largely contracted for continual increases. Those increases outpace inflation and revenue growth. It's a big, big deal. And I just think that we need to, if we collectively have some choices in front of us and decide not to take any of them because we don't like the service level results, that's a decision. But not studying it and not understanding it and not coming up with options and not coming up with some potential paths to reduce costs, I think is not doing everybody our full job.
Well, let me ask you this, because one of the troubles that I've had with it is a lack of definition. A number of things we've talked about here are, pardon the pun, street-level type of things. Putting curb and gutter, I know what that is. Plant more trees, I know what that is. When you talk about reducing public safety costs, as someone who's now been on the council for over 4 years and very involved beforehand, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. You must have some specific ideas of what you mean by that, not just studying options. What are we talking about? Because I think part of the reason why we don't have a conversation is, what do you mean?
I think we need to look at reducing service levels.
But such as what?
But I don't know how this shakes out, but whether it's less people in either of the departments, less facilities in the fire department, less anything. It's all people. 75% of our cost is 3 organizations, of which 3/4 or 80% of that is in 2. So we're talking about police and fire, by and large. And the question is, are there operations, are there structural differences that might do us a lot of good from a cost standpoint, understanding what those are, and then what the implications of those are on service level. Because you wouldn't necessarily just take them to save the money. So you think back to, for instance, we used to have at least one more fire station than we have now. I don't think we made the decision to close that necessarily in quite this kind of a context, but we had at least one more fire station than we have today. 15 years ago, 18 years ago?
1993.
So 20, 24 4 years ago. That was closed, and the impact to the village was what? I think most people would argue de minimis. So is that option exist elsewhere? I don't know the answer to that. I don't think any of us sitting here does. What I think we all know is that we get nervous about having the discussion about lowering, at least statistically on paper, service levels from a public safety standpoint. But there may be lower public safety levels that we can actually live with that have substantial cost savings. I don't know the answer to it. But that is where all our cost is. Our staff does this wonderful job up and down the line, from the department heads to the chiefs to Dave and his team, of controlling, Martin, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, controlling expenses and trying real hard to control expenses, but that doesn't talk about cost structure.
Well, and that's, I guess, where I have a trouble, because staff has always, and you can talk about whether it's public works, whether it's code enforcement, whether it's 801, whether it's police, whether it's fire, go back to the jump companies, and you can think of numerous examples of where, again, sort of on an everyday basis, the people on the line...
They've done it with our direction to not
have
reduce service levels.
Well,
That's
but I
big
mean,
difference.
but things have changed to try to manage costs, and they do that all the time.
With fixed
I
service
mean,
levels.
but it's a different thing to say, I want you to do X and tell me what the consequence of that is. And that's where I really, I think you've got to be much more direct about what you're talking about. If you're talking about closing a fire station.
Our conversations have always gone back to retaining retain or enhance is the wording we use all the time. Maintain or enhance. Our conversations, our direction to our team has always been maintain or enhance service levels. It's never been, let's take a look at lowering service levels. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about lowering service levels. If we take a response time number, it's just a number that people like to use, that varies across the country. We have a number, we don't like the idea in our gut generally of increasing it, right? But what if we did? Would we be that much worse than, pick a community?
Sure. I hear you. And I'll just tell you that for right now, and this is just right now, I think that what we have done to achieve the CLIA rating that we have for our police department and the ISO 1 rating for our fire department are something that I would be very reluctant to interfere with, and don't want to take, because those both have cost benefits to our residents directly. For example, the ISO 1 rating has a direct fire insurance benefit to our residents. I would not want to do anything now to affect that. So in terms of doing something to change our service levels for our first responders that would jeopardize those ratings for whatever it might be is not something I'm interested in right now in pursuing. But I wanted to have this conversation about what are you talking about.
It's a commitment then. I mean, I hear you.
I would rather first explore these other things about how we can do other things to maintain what we have. And again, when I talk about maintaining, I mean our CLIA rating, our ISO 1 rating, which I think we've very worked hard. I didn't do anything. The village has done very hard to earn that, much like our bond rating. And I'd like to maintain. That's what I'd like to maintain, because in a way we've achieved that. I don't want to lose it.
Here's the other thing we're maintaining. We're maintaining that, or we're saying we want to maintain that 75%.
That's just what I'm saying.
If that were the decision of the group, we're saying that we want that. What we're saying then, we're also maintaining 75% of our cost base increasing at a level that far outpaces both revenue and inflation.
With the understanding that there's always, on a day-to-day basis, within those same organizations, efforts going on to try to...
They're not, Mayor. We went through this on the board. We looked at staffing levels and growth as compared to staffing levels. We cannot sit here and assume we're going to continue to have 20+% decrease in staffing levels. And that's why we've been able to maintain that. We've been able to maintain those costs largely because while we've had an 11% increase in cost over a long period, which is great, we've dropped staffing levels by 30%.
But there are other management issues and there are attrition issues and all kinds of things that go on a daily basis that I think help to stem that. And you're right, it's not going to eliminate it. It's not going to flatline. But I guess my answer is thank you for providing that detail. It's me, myself, and I. Current position is I'm not interested in something that would jeopardize is too strong of a word.
that would risk losing, okay, that would jeopardize our CLIA rating and our ISO rating.
So we had two council members. Anybody else?
I agree.
Yeah, I want to just add a slightly different perspective on this. This absolutely is a strategic decision about the future direction of the village. I don't think it fits the criteria of a priority action item, because I don't think it would take staff very long to say what the costs and the impact is. I mean, this isn't a work project, this is a decision. And at the moment, I am totally unwilling to take a step to reduce our service levels, police or fire.
I think that's...
Okay, I'm totally willing to do that. But if Commissioner Barnett wants to bring this to a head, file a new business item. And then staff can tell us how much we would save if, hypothetically, I pose this, closing a fire station. How much would we save, and what would it do to our ISO rating? I don't want to threaten our ISO rating, but see, this isn't a high-priority action item that requires staff work of any great amount. It's a strategic decision. And I'm not,
I'm going to split the baby on your comments there a little bit. I agree with you that I don't want to do anything that jeopardizes our ISO rating or CLIA certification, number one. Number two, I do think this rises to the level of a high priority action item if folks wanted to do it. I don't. And it's because of the public engagement that would be necessary in order to make that decision. I don't think you say, I'm going to close a fire station or I'm going to cut a certain number of people out of the fire department without having a conversation with everybody.
Right, so,
now that,
for the purposes of tonight, then
We can obviously, I understand where this is going.
Yeah.
But Commissioner Barnett filed a new business item. Come on, Bill. A little flip for tonight's conversation. This is obviously if it were even suggested, would require at least 4 hours worth of thought. It's not going to go like that.
I also want to point out that it's, just real quick, that it's more than do we close this or do we close that. It's more than how many people do we lay off. It's more than CLIA and ISO, as important as all of those things are.
Response time.
Yes, seconds count.
Absolutely.
Seconds count. And you're talking about lives.
How quick do you get out of your driveway, because it's also public works and snow plowing.
It is, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Police, fire, snow plowing, those are the big ones.
So this, I think we have direction on this. Okay. Bob, you had other items you wanted to chat about?
Yeah, this whole gateway sign thing, I know that seems to be something we're also not going to do, but I guess if we're talking about high priority action versus not, that job is 80% done. Would it kill anybody to see if there was a way to fund it as we work on next year's budget? Pick one and see if there's a way to fund it in the budget.
So we could actually short circuit this one a little bit. We could make this a budget discussion. We don't have to design the signs. We could actually just say, does anybody, when the budget comes out, we'll say, do you want to put more in the capital projects fund to fund gateway signs or cut another project? So we'll take that as a...
I think we should have a referendum on the choices.
Because that's where our project always goes. If we're willing to short circuit,
Just take a poll.
then we can check back in.
Earlier.
The last comment I have is
There won't be an
that,
election until 18.
the last comment I have is that publicly funded art things, those that have been here a while will recognize seeing that keeps popping up there too, because somebody keeps submitting it. These are some of the things that we, perhaps there's another way to skin a cat, and it's not a high priority action item for our staff. I certainly would concede that. But something like this doesn't get started without a council deciding they want to be supportive. And it doesn't mean, I want to clarify, publicly funded. What I really mean is an art program in public spaces. And those can be funded, if you look across the country, a gazillion different ways. But it requires the authority.
Privately funded public art is what you're talking about.
Could be, or it could be, solicitations on water bills. It could be a number. It's a host of things. But the point is, it requires a body like this, the authoritative body in the area,
Interestingly
to
enough,
decide they wanted to engage the concept and devote some staff time to working either with council people or people on the outside at such an end. And that's what-
interestingly enough, all new development in Kansas City proper, 5%
Sure.
goes to public art and public spaces. 5% of every project. It makes a huge difference. But that's all putting out on the backs of private development. And it's an intriguing concept. It really is. And is beautiful.
I want to piggyback on something you just
Well,
said.
go ahead.
You reminded me, interesting concept, but remember we were talking about that impact fee?
Yes.
Having part of the impact fee go towards the
Historic
cost
preservation.
of historic preservation,
Yes.
because we have no funds to actually do that? I don't think it's a high priority action item. I think it's, give me 20 minutes and a pen, and then I could bang that one out, but...
So we're still actually working through the recommendations of the Historic Preservation Plan.
And it may be something that's already in works, but I don't want to lose sight of that.
I know the ADRB is actually talking about it currently. That's either on the upcoming agenda. It's that concept is not dead. It's next on the list for consideration.
Okay.
I'd also like to bring up the identify and adopt new revenue sources. It isn't a high priority action item, but or maybe it is if everybody wants to have a major discussion on it, but I've given some thought, and I asked staff to look into it, is a dog hotel tax. That could raise anywhere from 60 to more than 100,000 a year.
Animal boarding tax. That would be a great example of a revenue that's pretty consistent with trends in the modern economy as that industry has
Yeah.
grown.
We spend a lot of time talking about dogs, and I'm not talking about, hospitals and that type of overnight, but, people are actually leaving town, going on vacation, spending money elsewhere, and they leave their dogs here, and we charge people who stay here a hotel tax. Why not a small tax on on overnight boarding of dogs?
Does that apply to the water and biscuits too? Is there 1% food and beverage tax?
Maybe.
If you want. If you want. But,
Biscuits and chew toys?
I mean, I think my suggestion, my original suggestion was about $2, and it would raise over $100,000.
Yep.
So if staff would look into it, that's something we can do budget-wise, and if you need a dedicated revenue source for things like Meals on Wheels that we traditionally give $30,000 a year to, that could be a dedicated
Well, we can buy
source. and
public
it's
art with it,
something.
too.
So we already have a check mark by this, and we already have a great example of what one of those new revenues consistent with the modern economy could be. We've already actually, I talked to Commissioner Waldeck about that, worked on some of those. So I'm hearing this one stays on the list, and we just got an example of one of the items that might be discussed.
Yeah, the only thing I just want to clarify, the only thing I want to clarify, identify new revenue sources, the modern economy, and some of this is just in the messaging. We're not talking about, gee, let's find other ways we can get money to spend. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the world is changing, and how do we change, not reactively, but proactively, understanding that it's about replacement. It's not about, hey, let's come up with more money so we can spend more money.
Right.
That's not the idea.
This
just
isn't about paper bags or sweet drinks,
This
for
is-
sure. Not in my book.
This is about the obsolescence, if you will, of some of our major revenue sources in finding
Yes.
current once they
Replacements.
replace. I'll add the word replace.
Supplant, not supplement.
Mhm.
So we got a pretty good list with the purple check marks. Does anybody want to put a check mark next to any one of the remainings that are not checked or crossed off? Public art, volunteer corps, plans and/or requirements for catalyst sites in the comp plan.
I think plans requirements for the comp plan actually fits in EDC implementation of strat plan. I think we need to do that. I don't think it needs to be a separate item. I think it'll get worked into everything else.
I would like to do it. If it gets rolled into something else, I can work with that too.
All right, so what we'll tell Michael and the liaison to the EDC board at staff level, which is me, is that's important to this council that this be addressed. When we talk about our toolkit, when we talk about how we're going to do it, this is part of it. Good?
Got it.
Good, so
you remind him and he
it
reminds
gets an
me.
X, but it's taken us direction on catalyst sites.
And then I guess there's one final topic. I didn't bring this up earlier. It's not really sure how it fits into this context. But falling under the creative plan for future downtown and update the downtown zoning regulations. Finally, at our next meeting, I'll pass it out now so we have notice, I want to have a formal new business item for the downtown design review ad hoc committee that we've discussed.
Yeah, okay.
So-
I can't remember if that's coming to the first meeting in September of the council
Yeah.
or the second, but it's...
That's September
it's here.
5th, so there's a possibility. So I have a new business item, which by the rules I'm turning in now for our next council meeting that I will be at. I won't be here next week, so
Got it.
I'll pass it up.
And
So,
I will also bring up two items, and probably more in relation to what Bob was talking
And
about.
we've all seen this before.
But therefore,
I saw it back in May.
because of the nature, they have to be on an executive session.
Okay.
So, just an FYI for warning.
That sounds ominous.
what it is,
No,
it's
it's-
a strategic direction on some things and how we address things related to closed sessions. So it's, what did Commissioner White call it? A strategic decision direction, maybe not a whole project, but Bill and I have talked,
Right.
it would be a great discussion for us to have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, are we putting check marks by any of these other two?
Not at this time.
Okay. Staff has received tremendous and clear direction tonight. Thank you. We get it. Mr. Paradis thinks otherwise, but we get it.
You good, wasn't
You
clear?
have your sausage.
Yeah, we got it.
Public comment there?
Yep, public.
Public comment, questions, comments? All right, well, thank you very much for sticking with us throughout the balance of this discussion. This is obviously very important, and we do it every year. If there's nothing further,
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.